If you look at the top 3 healthcare companies in the US, each company's revenue is greater than the GDP of the UK. Can that not be a bubble?
Oh God. So the Gen AI revolution is collapsing the cost of the core token of healthcare, enabling a $10 trillion market. That's the opportunity here. But then you put it in perspective. There was this fantastic bar graph that was published in one of the investment banking reports. Nvidia alone is 8% of the S&P 500, and all of healthcare combined is 10%? Like, it's wild. And I'll go one step further. We take the view that one of the biggest secrets of Silicon Valley has not necessarily been innovation, it's been cost collapse.
How does that impact the next wave of medicine over the next 12 months?
Oh, look, my partners in our capital strategy, they're investing in therapeutics and med device. We need to find resources to create new ways to further back medicine, med device, and clinical care. We have a number of opportunities in our portfolio that are completely new, de novo molecules. Excelsior is recreating at a very fast pace entire libraries of small molecules through a novel way of making chemistry that enables us to level up and enables us as a society to get the next level of products for patients.
So with the incredible savings around efficiency and productivity, naturally you'd think that the use of AI can make that more efficient. We've seen big promises before in AI and drug discovery. What's different now?
Ooh.
Welcome to Leading Beyond the Lab. Today I'm joined by Edward Kliphuis, a partner of Sofinnova Digimed. It's a pivotal time for the firm. Sofinnova has just closed out an oversubscribed €650 million fund, which signals huge conviction in the life sciences space. Today we dig into what it's really like and what's different about this current moment in the AI revolution for healthcare, why Ed describes the 2017 year as the watershed moment akin to the combustion engine moment, which has laid the foundations and unlocked the potential of the healthcare space today. And we explore Sofinnova Digital Medicine's long-term strategy to invest in long-term mismatches between supply and demand. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So I'd like to challenge you to start with, Ed.
Well, let's do it.
On your 2017 watershed moment to start this podcast off. We've seen big promises before in AI and drug discovery. What's different now?
What's different now? The power of context. Since the seminal 2017 paper came out, it proposed a new mechanism. AI before was deterministic. It basically could say fracture, not fracture, or if you've seen Silicon Valley, hot dog, not hot dog. But it did not have the power of context, so it could only see the fracture, but not the rest of the being and not the rest of the impact. Now, think of a patient who comes into a doctor's office with a broken arm. Sure, that patient has a broken arm that needs to be fixed, but the doctor could observe that perhaps, their gait could be off, and that could be a marker of an underlying systemic issue, perhaps neurological, and thereby ask for follow-on tests and whatever. That's been the power of our medical practice up to this point. And now finally, we've proposed this new mechanism where AI can sort of like have attention itself and look at information in a wider pool of data points and look at the information pieces in context. Now, that allows it to, on the tech bio side, so on the AI side for drug discovery and drug development, sort of like combat the reductionism that's embedded in the way that we practice medicine, where we effectively take the leap that whatever we observe in complexity holds the same in simplicity. So our drug development practice we relegate human complexity to an animal model, to a petri dish, and then we try and observe what happens in isolation. And we take the assumption that whatever happens in isolation also behaves like that in the complex setting, in the human setting. More often than not, that's not the case. Hence the attrition in drug development. And on the services side, on the healthcare services side, it has the challenge, or it has the promise now that we can replace services. So we can actually take over some of the mundane tasks at the moment that a lot of clinicians, a lot of support staff are faced with, and take those over with AI and thereby free up their capacity for these highly trained, highly paid individuals to actually allow their skills to be used in a much more impactful setting. That's what's changed.
So where do you think the next trend and the way that everything's shaping, what do you think the next big trend is?
Look, we're sort of like getting, if you extrapolate the data points from where we are today, we've now been given the power to look at, let's say, complexity in its entirety. So the entire idea of life sciences up to this point has been reductionism. We've taken the complexity of human beings, of our biology, And we relegated that to models, an animal model, a petri dish. And then more often than not, what we observe in isolation actually doesn't hold in the complex system. But all we have done is expect that whatever we observe in isolation actually is true in the complex system. And this is why we have such attrition in drug development, drug discovery. So we start with an idea around a pathway, and then we say, okay, fine, this particular molecule hits that particular protein, then it triggers this cascade in the body. We see that works in a petri dish. Now we try it in an animal model, and then we try it in a human being. But more often than not, that sort of like step from simple to complex, we lose products there, and that's very time consuming and very, very costly. Now we have the power to actually recreate the complexity of our own models in silico. And so one of the strategies at Digital Medicine that we're pursuing on the tech bio side is collapsing the cost of drug discovery and drug development, because we can now replace parts of the experimentation by computation. And I want to clarify, I'm not saying that we can get rid of clinical trials. Absolutely not. Those are still exercises in looking for unknown unknowns. But what we can do is have a much higher accuracy at shots on goal. That's the whole point of this.
And so when I've always felt that there's two schools of thought. There's the optimizers and the new. So the people that look to innovate and optimize drug development or a medical device equivalent, and the people that look to recreate. How long do you think it will take to get to the latter?
Oh, look, I think there's if by the latter you're basically saying like completely new de novo molecules. We have a number of opportunities in our portfolio that we think are pursuing that. Latent Labs, which we backed about a year ago, is doing protein design. We can now create proteins and design proteins that do not occur in nature. With effects that cannot be achieved by proteins in nature because, again, they simply don't exist. Excelsior, another investment in the small molecule side that we've taken, is recreating at a very fast pace entire libraries of small molecule through a novel way of making chemistry that simply enables computers and enables robots to conduct this chemistry. They then create molecules and run them through a large number of biological assays. And so you create these libraries that are not just structural information, but very deep. So they're structural information. They give you synthesizability. They give you, ADME properties, tox properties, like whatever you can think of is necessary to have that, higher accuracy of shots on goal. And so all of that sort of enables us to level up. And enables us as a society to get the next level of products to our to patients.
With the incredible savings around efficiency and productivity, less trial and error, and manual processes, I'd love to know how that would feed into things like the old adage, where typically 10% or 1 in 10 of biotechs on the therapeutic side would be successful. We're looking from an investment perspective. Naturally, you'd think that the use of AI can make that more efficient, either from understanding more about the investment before you make it, so it's more likely to be successful, or saving time generally. Have you got any thoughts around that?
I would be arrogant to presume that I can see the future, but I guess if the data points that we're collecting today hold true in the future, it is not unreasonable to infer that the industry has to rethink itself, and that you're basically going to find companies rewarded for creating a large number of smaller bets rather than the one big bet that perhaps is being underwritten today in the industry.
Okay.
I don't think that will happen like overnight, but I reckon that's the movement where what we'll see. And in fact, if you take it from the other way around, I think that's what society needs, because
from the patient perspective.
Yeah, from a patient, but even from a societal perspective as well, right? So if you think about what is happening right now, the supply and demand mismatch that you alluded to, like the challenge that we're seeing is that healthcare is becoming unaffordable. And sure, we have the demographic pyramid and we have more people drawing from the system and fewer people contributing to it because people live longer. That's one side of the problem. The other side of the problem is that our innovation is working against us, because we understand more about our own biology and about pathology. And so we're seeing, if you look at the number of recognized disease subtypes over the last 50 years, it has almost increased like 8-9-fold from 7,000 to 55,000 today. If you plot that alongside the proportion that we're spending on healthcare as a proportion of GDP, then you can see that those two track. And so our, the Hippocratic Oath, where we have to keep people alive if we can, and of course do no harm, But that's kind of working against us, because the more specific the indications become, the more specific the treatment has to become, the more specific and the more costly it is to develop that, the more specific and costly oftentimes it is to administer that. And so something has to change in that whole equation. Otherwise, we're going to end up in a societal place where we can't afford care for people. And if we're thinking that societal unrest is perhaps increasing today, I don't want to live that moment.
Yeah, that's fascinating, Ed. So how does that feed into Sofinnova digital medicine's worldview?
So again, we take the view that one of the biggest secrets of Silicon Valley has not necessarily been innovation, it's been cost collapse. And this cost collapse has been as old as time itself, as humanity itself. When we were living in caves and we needed to start a fire, we went out to the woods and collected timber for days on end. Then became candle wax. It was 6 hours of labor to get the wax for the candle, then the kerosene lamp. And now the equivalent for you to flick on a light switch is perhaps a nanosecond, the equivalent of labor. That's been the cost collapse of doing that action. Now, Henry Ford had the same thing. Like, he collapsed the cost of creating a car by putting the conveyor belt in place. Then Google collapsed the cost of eyeballs. Instead of having expensive billboards by the side of the road, you could now have an advertisement on a landing page for a fraction of a cost. And the AI revolution, the Gen AI revolution, is collapsing the cost of the core token of healthcare, we believe, and thereby enabling effectively a $10 trillion market where all of a sudden the floodgates have been lifted. That's the opportunity here. The opportunity is there's pent-up demand of the magnitude of 10 trillion and rising. That is clearly supply constrained, and we're seeing challenges with demand increasing and constrained supply, and this is that solution for it. This is the ability to now create the core token of healthcare in two ways. On the tech bio side, collapsing the cost of creating better and new drugs at a fraction of the cost by replacing a lot of the experimentation with computation, and on the health tech side, by collapsing the cost of access to care and collapsing the cost of routing through a system. Those two things are the things that we invest in.
There's enormous savings on trial and error there, isn't there?
I reckon there is, yeah. So, and again, I think those, when you get, or you or a loved one have a medical problem, your first question is, where can I get the care that I need? The second question is, what is the best care that I can get?
Yeah.
And that first question is health tech. Again, collapsing the cost of being able.
Sadly, the third one is how much will I need to do that?
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
So that benefits that. Because
and I think the biggest misconception for a lot of people is cost collapse seems like it's not a money-making opportunity. But if you look at history, actually collapsing the cost has usually created enormous wealth creation and sort of like a leveling up of society, and that's kind of the opportunity here as well. Again, if you think about what's happening in the supply and demand mismatch in healthcare, sure, there's the demographic challenges, more people drawing from a system, fewer people contributing to the system. I think that's fairly well evidenced. But on the other side, we're having our innovation work against us. So if you look at the amount of recognized disease subtypes since the 1970s, it went from something like 7,000 to 55,000 today. And then, that is almost the same slope as the increase in healthcare spend as a proportion of GDP, both in the US and in Europe. So the more we understand of diseases, the more we understand of biology, the more specific the treatments have to get, but the more costly it is to develop them. And, we want to stave off that ethical dilemma that comes from having to question whether we should provide care to somebody or not.
And is that what you mean when you say healthcare abundance is Sofinnova's mission? So by basically making it so accessible through that macro scaling of the solution or whatever it is, through cost collapse.
Yeah, exactly. And again, I want to avoid. We're capitalists still. We still believe in the fact that we have limited partners to pay back and consistent returns to deliver.
But the macro delivery of the mechanism or device or whatever it is
and
enables that.
It's about inefficiencies, and the inefficiencies, taking out the inefficiencies and taking out the froth from the system that is unnecessary. And by doing so, by replacing administrative tasks, for example, with a services-based AI, you can again free up resources, free up energy of this highly skilled surgeon to actually, or highly skilled, whatever, pediatrician to perform his or her task, and thereby further us as a society.
It's funny, isn't it? When I think about what you're saying, I think of surgeons and doctors and practitioners and how much discomfort from change they can manage.
Yeah.
Because you think the rate of AI and the amount of change it can cause is completely disproportionate to how much the brain can handle when learning new things. So there's a real...
But Gen AI has completely changed that,
Yeah.
right? So if you think... we did this thing where behind closed doors, we asked a bunch of friends of the firm and like some of our surrounding practicing physicians, how many people use Gen AI in their clinical practice? And it's almost 70 to 80%. The other thing is the interface nowadays is no longer a complicated EMR, it's a voice. So you can basically talk to these systems. That has completely dropped the barrier of entry. And so all of a sudden these systems are being widely used, widely adopted. And I guess the question that we have to face as a society ourselves is, do we want all this knowledge, all this power concentrated in a couple of big players on the other side of the pond, or is there perhaps a regulatory and safe way to do this? And that is one of the questions and one of the parts that we're paying particular emphasis to.
Yeah. Yeah, and when you assess deals then over long-term mismatches in supply and demand like we talked about, over individual deals, how does that feed into that?
Again, there's we try and invest in the world as it is today.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Everything I sort of like talked about, sounds very futuristic, and you might think to yourself like, yeah, that's great, but what is happening today? And so we do think about supply and demand mismatches that manifest themselves either into the near term future or in the long run, and we try and back technologies that have abilities to address problems today and really address those stopgap problems in the future. Clinical trials being one of them. Recruitment is still a problem. How can we address that? Can we find better data on patients coming through the care system? Can we label those individuals? Can we route them to a clinical trial right away? This is what companies like Ingenix are working on. The same thing with more specific treatments and more specific therapies. Again, I mentioned Leiden Labs and Excelsior. Biocortex in our portfolio is looking, for example, at challenges surrounding the microbiome. We do not, as humanity, fully understand all the drug-bug, bug-gene and bug-drug interactions. We don't get it yet.
Oh, you're so true. I was reading yesterday about the gut-brain axis and how that influences the second brain of the body.
That's right. And so, and if you think about it, evolutionarily speaking, we have all ingested bacteria, like they're mitochondria. And so any metabolite of the microbiome basically has a profound effect on your biology. So it's things that are very hard to quantify, where you have subpopulations, even of the same the same phenotypical makeup that react differently because they're in different parts of the world.
That's really interesting, Ed. So now I just wanted to ask you about the oversubscribed 650 million Fund 11 that Sofinnova has just landed and secured.
Yeah.
How does that impact the next wave of medicine over the next 12 months and so forth?
So my partners in our capital strategy, they're investing in therapeutics and med device. Indeed closed the 11th vintage of our flagship fund. We went out for 500. We actually had a hard cap at 600. We raised it. So it is a testament to, I guess, the quality of the firm and the quality of the investments that we made in the past. That even despite challenging fundraising conditions, we managed to close this fund at such a great size. The other thing is, I guess there's a recognition in the market that we need to find resources to create new ways to further back medicine, med device, and clinical care. So how will it impact? If history suggests anything with some of the investments we made, hopefully profoundly, but obviously that is all to be seen with the investments we make.
And in terms of the healthcare industry generally, I'd be really interested in your take on, if you look at the top 3 healthcare companies in the US, each company's revenue is greater than the GDP of the UK.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about that kind of cerebrally in my own time, thinking about how can that not be a bubble? Yeah. Or is the government going to be working in tandem with the tech companies on how we go about our business to make us more efficient? I'd love to get your view on that.
Oh God. Yeah, this is
Is this dangerous? Is it?
No, you're being put on the spot. Like I don't, because I
find it
I don't know. It is fascinating, right? Yeah. So Lilly is the first company to cross $1 trillion.
Yeah.
The first pharma company, sorry, and we were all like jubilant about that. But then you put it in perspective, and there was this fantastic bar graph that it was published in one of the investment banking reports, and you think like 1 trillions like this, and then the rest of the tech sector is like that. Like, I think tech is now, Nvidia alone is what, 8% of the S&P 500, and all of healthcare combined is 10%. Like, it's wild. Whilst, by the way, healthcare is coming on to like 20-25% of US GDP. I think there's the HSBC report on OpenAI seems to suggest there's a massive shortfall in the economics underpinning a lot of this. There's luminaries like Geoffrey Hinton and Jan LeCun coming out saying that the transformer architecture might not be the end all. Like, we've basically been operating under the premise that more data feeding to these models ultimately creates these outsized insights, and that scaling curve is ongoing. And they're big advocates of saying that it might not be. And Ilya Sutskever came out saying the same thing. I'm not smart enough to comment on that, but what I do think is we've been given a very interesting tool that in my domain of healthcare. In our domain of healthcare has a profound impact, because again we are able to replace some of the services and thereby free up human resources to perform the more complex tasks. And you can see it already with Hippocratic AI and some of these other companies actually having the fastest adoption ever, even faster than EMRs, into the healthcare systems in the US and in Europe. So for our sector of healthcare, I'm very bullish on what this impact will be.
And you've said in the past about how infrastructure is built and applications are added, and the future is moving towards the application layer. I'd like to hear your thoughts about that.
Yeah, I think look, there was a moment in time, I think, where a lot of people invested in these models, and we did as well. We invested in a company called Bioptimus, which is trying to tie together all the scales of biology, and then, effectively what I mentioned earlier, like the contextualization of all of biological data is something that they enable. But there's sort of this joke in the team when we're saying that the weaponization of capital is real. And I think, when some of these companies have hold in triple-digit millions, it's hard to catch up to those companies, because they're weaponizing the data access, the compute, and they're off to the races. And so then the next question is, what kind of products and services can be created of those models that ultimately deliver the value, and that's really where we think the opportunity is at right now, which, by the way, is not different than what we've seen before in the internet age, right? And maybe to your point earlier, maybe what we're seeing right now is not different than the .com era. So
it does feel like another chapter, doesn't it?
It does feel different. I'm not gonna lie. Yeah. I started as a research analyst just after the 2008 crisis in the public markets. That was not a fun time to start. This has been bullish, but let's see.
Well, I've heard that it's been more. There's been more challenges felt by the people that have had the challenges in this market than they have, or maybe last 2 years, than they were at the 2007-2008 crisis. Don't know how that aligns with what your thoughts are.
I don't know. I find I find the disconnect between the real world and the stock market and some of the political pressures. I find it a fascinating thing to watch. Again, I'm not, I'm a mere venture capitalist looking at investments in digital medicine, so I won't claim to know things about that domain. But it's a fascinating thing to observe. And
I've seen how AI, and we've read about how AI is changing drug discovery. You must have some companies and that are doing things really innovatively. I'd love to hear your thoughts around how they're looking to reshape drug development.
Yeah, I think so. Drug discovery is the first part that we were touched on, right? And I think that is interesting and exciting. The drug development side, again, Excelsior is a prime example of that. This is a company that we backed together with Coastline with Deerfield. Actually, was created by Deerfield. The whole innovation is, if you think about Lego blocks, you can have Lego blocks in different sizes and different shapes. They have one thing in common, and that's that little bump at the top. And that allows them to basically reproducibly be connected. Mm-hmm. And so you can connect any Lego block, regardless of its shape and size, to a next one and to a next one. Excelsior has done exactly that. So they've created a chemical language, if you will, where they create little blocks, and then they create a little bump at the top that you can basically connect them together. That little bump is called the TIDA group. Now, this block chemistry allows for these blocks, or these building blocks, to be standard to be in powder form at standard temperature and just handled by machines, etc. Why this is revolutionary, if you think about the DMTA cycle, so design, make, test, analyze in small molecules, normally that's a monthly long process where you send effectively a recipe for a chemical to another continent, you get it back, you try it again. These guys have basically collapsed all of that into one space, 40 feet, and they have a laboratory right now in the middle of Manhattan. Quite cool that you have that whole chemical thing right there in the middle of Manhattan, where they're running.
Who's leading that?
Sorry?
Who's leading that?
It's Mike Foley. Mike Foley's the CEO. And it was an innovation from Marty Burke from the University of Illinois. And so they're creating these libraries right now on the drug development side of all kinds of different molecules. Like Lilly joined us in this room, or joined us in this round, I should say. And they came with a number of molecules they couldn't make themselves. Excelsior could make them and could test them in a number of biological assays. Now, to your point about drug development, why that's exciting, because now you can for instance do injectable to oral arbitrage. So you have an antibody, but if you know exactly how it binds and where it binds, you can make a small molecule that is stable at room temperature and actually can be formulated as an oral, and you can take the biological risk that has already been assumed and effectively just create that in a new formulation.
And what do you think the future has in store for robotics and automation when it comes to delivery in healthcare?
I'm very bullish. I mean, my partner Anne Osdois, CEO of Moon Surgical, if you look at what they're doing there with how they're revolutionizing laparoscopy and all these procedures, I think there's an enormous amount of strides to be made there. And again, rather than having the knee-jerk reaction of they're coming for our jobs, I think that the way we should look at this is we're freeing up energy and we're freeing up potential for people who have been highly trained to actually perform these highly impactful tasks and use their skills in more specific settings rather than in mundane day-to-day things that can be replaced.
Yeah, it's all upside, isn't it, when I think about things like that?
I think AI in general has a lot of downsides and a lot of dystopian consequences to it, right? I mean,
dystopian consequences, that's a good term. I've coined that.
Well, if you think about it, I mean, on a social media side, I mean, if you're scrolling a feed, instead of creators creating a feed, maybe the feed will just create itself just for you, and you're just doom scrolling to something that's endlessly created purely for you. But that n=1 universe, in my view at least, has one place where it's really beneficial. And that's healthcare, because that's the personalized medicine we were talking about all these decades.
Yeah, you can self-innovate. And that I was reading about digital medicine and how the applications of the wristwatches or whatever, in 10 to 15 years' time, are going to inform your GP before you get there. Yeah. So I mean, that's all upside in my mind.
It is, although, I wear a Whoop myself, and I have this debate with my wife whether, the number I get when I wake up and sort of like the addiction I get to see how I slept.
Oh, I know, that's a problem, isn't it?
It is a massive problem. Yeah. It is a massive, and whether it's, is it real or is it not, and does it impact me, or like which one came first?
I've never slept properly before. That's what I'm thinking.
Exactly.
I've never had a good night's sleep. On to your investment strategy and how you work as a VC person.
Oh dear.
So when you meet with founders, what do you look for? Because you must speak to hundreds of companies a month.
Yeah, we look for spiky founders. We look for people who are just exceptional in one domain or another. People with ambition. At Sofinnova, we're very founder-centric. So if you come to our offices, we have this wall with all the founders who made money for the firm. One of the key takeaways, by the way, is that multiple people come back more than once, which I guess implies that we're doing something well. Like, sure, we have a commercial organization to run, and we'll make sure we get a good deal. But equally, people will want to work with us time and again, because hopefully the value that we deliver. I guess what we look for is exactly that: people who want to go on this journey with us, stand shoulder to shoulder. If sort of the relationship between VC and founder is almost like a T-shaped, we bring that vertical part of the T-shape. A founder is usually super deeply versed in their own domain, and we don't claim to be operators like them. But what we do claim is that we can bring a broader view, like a generalist specialist view, if that makes sense. And hopefully together that should give an information arbitrage that ultimately allows performance.
So when we break that down, so when you're evaluating it, you've got the founder themselves, and them as a leader and as a founder of a business, and you've got the idea and the concept behind what they're trying to do, the difference they're trying to make, the questions they're trying to solve. with regards to the scientific value proposition, how do you determine what's a great investment and one to 100% back and one to, put a question mark next to it?
Do you know where venture capital originally comes from?
No.
So it comes from whaling.
Oh, does it?
Yeah. So we have VC comes originally, as far as I've been told, from whaling, or at least from the mercantile practices of the Europeans in the tail end of the Middle Ages, where rich merchants would put money together to fund a journey, like Magellan, for example, going circumnavigating the world, and then they would underwrite that journey, and obviously they would be entitled to the proceeds of such a journey, and everything that was carried back by the crew, 20% of that was for the crew, the carried interest, which is still the same.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess along the same vein, we still assess the island. Where are people going to? Is it an unknown with great riches? Is it a known unknown? Do we know what that island looks like? We assess the vessel. What does the company look like? We assess the team. What does the crew look like? And all the equipment that they're bringing on board. And I guess all these different elements. So what is the destination of the journey? Is the journey perilous? Is it known or is it unknown?
Yeah.
Do we understand if the vessel fit for it? Like sometimes you have to go to the Arctic. Sometimes you're going, across the Pacific. Like those are different journeys, and the vessel is different for those journeys. So I guess that's how we're looking at a lot of this. So specific answers on scientific things are very specific to every single domain that we're assessing, rather than being able to give you a generalist answer.
And what about on the personality of the founder? You mentioned about them being spiky, exceptional. What about on the human level of that?
I should ask you.
Well, I've got my view on it. Yeah, my view is that they're problem solvers. So if the company needs to raise money, they're able to raise money. If they need to put together an organisational structure, then they put together an organisational structure. But I'd be interested in what your view on that is.
Yeah, I think on an overarching level, keeping your eyes on the prize and sort of like seeing a lot of things that function of that is very important. Some of the best founders we work with, for instance, they know where they want to go. They're also capable of reassessing the destination. Is this a reasonable goal still? Is it unreasonable? And if so, do I need to adjust or do I not need to adjust? They're very good at filtering information. This is feedback I get from my board, but these two things are very important for me. They're mission critical right now. The rest I need to ignore. But I guess my personal, this might come back to haunt me. But I guess we like unreasonable founders, people who are unreasonably ambitious.
Okay.
Because I think we are ourselves unreasonably ambitious.
Well, the history of Sofinnova in itself tells you that.
Yeah.
So one clear goal and completely determined to achieve that.
Yeah, and again, it doesn't have to be a Pyrrhic victory, right? I think that's sort of the challenge. Like when is a victory a Pyrrhic victory? When are you, just winning the battle for the sake of winning the battle, but ultimately losing the war? And that's a very difficult question. Some founders are great champions. They lead from the front and they're fantastic. Some founders are great strategists. They're, like generals overlooking a battlefield. And again, I think it's the marriage of the company and the journey it's on and the leadership it has, and those things have all got to come together. And oftentimes, that's very hard to assess on the outset.
And now to give that question an AI twist.
Yeah.
What is the common misunderstanding at the intersection between AI and life sciences, from traditional to the new way of doing things, when making that judgment for these founders?
That the buyers of your solution have the same level of technical foresight as you. It's very hard, because I think this industry is literally moving at two speeds. We have on the one side sort of the AI-enabled speed, and on the other side we still have the incumbents, and the incumbents move at a different speed. And rightfully so, because some of these organizations have been around for hundreds of years, and so it's a risk aversion versus a willingness to win at all cost. I guess I read an article recently about the difference between a normal distribution of outcomes in business and a power law distribution of outcomes. And most incumbents are okay with a normal distribution of outcomes. They will just want a consistent X% per annum. Venture capital and founders are all on that power law curve, and so things have to happen fast, and there's this incredible potential for enormous upside, but there's a massive risk for failure as well. And I guess that's the biggest critical tension between the buyers of the solution, which are the incumbents who don't necessarily have the necessity to move fast, and the founders who need to move at lightning speed and are butting up against the wall of traditionalism.
Yeah. So when preparing for this conversation, you talk about the 28th regime.
I did.
A book on unified Europe and the future of things. I'd love to get your take on how the influences and learnings from that book could be looked through as a lens for today.
Oh, I'm a European at heart. I love this continent, and I think we're facing a very interesting moment in history where we have to come together, and at this point it's very hard to come together. I'm a Dutch national, but I've lived Switzerland, Spain, UK, and every time you move countries, there's different social security numbers, different cell phone, different bank accounts, whereas in the US you don't have that. And so the US enables you to actually have these clusters of talent. There's this saying that in Cambridge, Massachusetts, you can go there and you can start your 5th biotech, but never have to change the school for your kids. And it's great because everything is around the corner, and so the opportunity cost for your life is very low. That's and so you can take more risk on the work front. In Europe, we don't have that. If you fail, and I don't know, you're doing a startup in Amsterdam, now you have to move to Paris for the next. That's hard. That's hard for the family, and so we need to find a way to overcome that. And I think the only way to overcome that is basically to put our national pride aside. We have all these problems around taxpayers' money only having to be invested in the region where the taxpayer money is being paid from. So again, there has to be a solution across this continent to come together. And the 28th regime, at least from what is being passed right now, a unified set of rules for investments to be made across the union. I think that's a fantastic opportunity. Because it solves that initial part where you have a standardized mechanism, you don't have questions anymore about employee stock options, you don't have questions anymore around how to incentivize founders, but the question around exits, for example, will persist because we do not have a European NASDAQ. There is no deep capital market here. If you want to exit and you want to IPO, you still have to, you go to the UK, you go to Paris, you go to Amsterdam, but even there, the depth of the capital markets is simply not as it is in the US. So, yeah. Yeah,
and what when you look at your portfolios, how are they split? Are they predominantly global, US, Asia, Europe?
We're global investors. We do 70% Europe, 30% US.
Is that a general strategy, or is that just how it is?
That's a general strategy. I mean, we've traditionally done that, and the reason is we don't have presence in the US. So we do invest actively in the US, but usually those are through very deep personal connections or. You
don't lead those investments.
Oh, we do as well. Yeah, okay. Yeah, for sure. But again, we don't claim to see the best deal in Silicon Valley that comes cold to us because, that's half a world away. Mm-hmm. Whereas we like to think that we see pretty much everything in France, for example, which is our home market.
Because the oldest life sciences VC firm in the world, aren't you?
Yeah, 1972.
Wow.
I was around since the beginning of that.
Every year gets a little bit harder to say.
Yeah, exactly. Every year becomes more believable. That's the problem.
For founders, CEOs, and people looking to invest in their knowledge and know-how about trends and the way health AI or AI in health tech bio is going, who do you see as key influences or influencers in the industry or academic world that you would suggest or give advice for people to follow?
Ooh. I don't know, because this is so groundbreaking. We're so at the forefront of it. Because there's existential questions that come off of this, right? There was an article in the FT the other day around the rise of eugenics, which obviously has been widely associated with the Nazi regime and picking the right traits for your for your next of kin. But if you think about it, for example, doing IVF and not picking the progeny that is, susceptible to cystic fibrosis is a form of eugenics, but nobody would say that is something that we should avoid. And so where is that line? And I guess that those are the ethical things that we're still grappling with today. And a lot of the science is informed, I find, by that. Science is informed by what it's able to, and sort of like the break is like, what do we accept as society? And it seems like those two things we're sort of surfing that wave while we're here. So we at Sofinnova, we developed this in-house AI engine called Sophia, which coincidentally is the name of my middle daughter, which is not entirely by accident. But the firm has developed this. My partner Gabi and my other partner Ada have been instrumental in this. And what we do there is we track exactly those signals of like, who are thought leaders in a particular domain, and we try and track, who are, for example, publishing on particular innovative fields that we should reach out to, that we should speak with. And the funny thing is there's a consistent sort of like signal coming off of particular institutions, but the individuals vary. And there's a lot of, especially in AI, a lot of new people coming with very groundbreaking ideas that all of a sudden become protagonists in their field. So it's a real life evolution that we're witnessing. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, it is. It's at the bleeding edge.
Yeah, which is equally daunting because, I mean, just like with surfing, you got to make sure you don't fall off the wave.
So we've got time for one more question.
Yeah.
For people that are listening that want to reach out to you, founders, CEOs, other investors, how can they do that?
Look me up on LinkedIn. Send me a message on LinkedIn. I think my email's on the website. Yeah, that's probably easiest.
Thank you so much for joining me here today, Ed.
Thanks.
I've really enjoyed it.
Likewise.